Hello and welcome to the Inside Track, the podcast where we chat about all the things that give you the edge in the world of innovation, business design, tech, and culture. I'm Fuzlin Esau, and today we're joined once again by Toby Rogers, Head of Product at Hedgehog Lab, and a new voice, Stephen Boyle, Tech Lead Front-End Engineering Manager, also at Hedgehog Lab. As we look at what's been hitting the news this week, before we jump in though, Stephen, I would love for you to give us a little bit of an intro to yourself before we kick off.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Stephen. As Fuzlin mentioned, I'm a tech lead and sort of front-end engineering manager here at Hedgehog Lab. So a lot of my day-to-day is involved in interviews, one-to-ones, looking after teams, but I'm very hands-on as well. So very kind of still coding, still doing all that stuff. I've been at Hedgehog Lab now for, I think it'll be 8 years in January, which is a lot of time to be spent behind the screen of a Mac. But yeah, no, it's been a great journey so far, and yeah, look forward to what we've got going on next.
Awesome. So our first topic that we're kicking off is one that we spoke about a bit briefly last week as well. The idea of agentic UI, which sort of suggests interfaces that generate themselves in real time based on user intent, removing a lot of the need for predefined screens and flows, which opens up a lot of possibilities, especially in complex environments, especially in banking. If AI starts to make building effortless, the real sort of constraints shift to that coordination and judgment and understanding what should be built in the first place. What happens, do you think, to product thinking when the interface is no longer something you design, but something that assembles itself around intent in real time?
I think this is super exciting and kind of follows on from some of the things that we were touching on last week. But we were talking about the idea of zero UI and the fact that we're probably moving towards having AI-powered chat interfaces as our sort of main user interface for dealing with kind of digital product experiences. But now that we're getting to the point where AI kind of agentic coding tools are able to develop front-end design on the fly, we're moving potentially to a world where you can create interfaces in the moment in the screen. And we've been looking at this for a client that we've been working with in kind of fintech and banking about how you could potentially use that sort of real-time UI design to really personalize and customize kind of really quite complicated financial data and do some really quite interesting and complicated analysis in a way that's kind of really engaging and really presentable and prevents you having to click through a load of customization buttons and doing a load of stuff like that. And from a kind of product design perspective, it moves us really far into thinking about what kind of the impact you're trying to deliver is. So instead of thinking about these are the screens and these are the graphs that we need to produce to show this financial information, it's how do we answer the question that we think our customer is going to have about their financial data? What are the questions that they're potentially going to ask? How do we build an agentic flow that supports them with answering those questions? And kind of conceptualizing and visualizing that gets quite difficult, but potentially gives you a really exciting edge for what you can do in the front end design. And really keen to hear what Stephen thinks about this as well on the tech side.
Yeah, so like as someone who's been building front ends for the past 8 years, it's super interesting because the world that we're living in now, everything can just be turned on its head, right? And I think Kari Saarinen had a great article on X where he mentioned something called the malleable software that never was. And he mentioned something really, really interesting in there where it was like, let users use and let builders build. You've got these great agentic tools nowadays that we use for our customers, things like Liverpool to spin up quick prototypes, V0 and stuff like this. But they're all kind of powered by people who are engineers or are product people as well. But I can't imagine a world one day where, you know, you're on your Facebook feed and you're like, well, I kind of don't like this experience. I'm going to tell it how to look, and it's going to agentically manipulate itself to look like how I want it to look. But I think what's really important is that probably not every user is a product market expert person. They maybe don't know what the best experience is, but it opens up a lot of possibilities, seeing how malleable software really is nowadays, and that the code is going to eventually be this black box of a thing we're just speaking to and continuously iterating on top of, I think.
I think that's so cool that we're sort of now almost forced to really start thinking about the customer again and the user again, and really sort of deep dive into what is it that they want from this before we've even started working on a journey. We sort of like, where do they want to get to? And I think that's a really sort of lovely thing to think about, is just that sort of like return to what do users want, what do customers want, rather than this is what the journey looks like. Do you think, however, there's in sort of now this idea of sort of being able to generate these infinite UI variations, how do you kind of stop organizations from just sort of mistaking speed of building for clarity of thinking? Is there a way to kind of like make sure that we're taking both of these things into consideration?
Yeah, I think the whole agentic UI stuff and getting something from a product from 0 to 1, it's incredibly useful. Getting that proof of concept out, iterating on top of internal ideas is great. But there's still an art and a craftsmanship to doing a lot of that user research and understanding the problem, to then crafting user interfaces that solves that problem correctly, rather than just vibe coding a solution and iterating on top of the agentic UI in that regard. I still think that's still a super important pathway in the SDLC than just maybe saying, can you keep on doing these things? It's absolutely great for spinning up internal things and maybe experimentation. But I think, yeah, solving that initial problem comes down to, product market fit and all the rest of it as well. Toby, I don't know what you think of it kind of from like a product driven perspective.
I've got two competing views on this that I keep kind of bouncing between. So my stance as a product person has always been that low fidelity wins when it comes to concept ideation, because low fidelity sketches, wireframes, stuff drawn out on a whiteboard leaves loads of room for interpretation and discussion and for kind of digging into the problem that you're trying to solve. And I always kind of thought that moving towards high fidelity concepts really early kind of removed that space for ideation and moved us into solutionizing too quickly, because once something becomes high fidelity, it feels really, really real, and it feels like you've kind of solved the problem before you've done any real research or any kind of real exploration into what you're trying to do. Yeah. But with prototyping tools like Lovable and Figma Make, and the speed with which you can get to a high fidelity concept, I think there's actually something really interesting there. So the kind of stance around low fidelity works really well for people who know about building products, product managers, designers, engineers, who can kind of conceptualize stuff when it's on a whiteboard or it's on a piece of paper. But when you're talking to people who aren't product people, who aren't engineers, who aren't designers, who haven't built products, being able to visualize stuff really quickly is really super powerful. So we've run a workshop with a client recently where we went from kind of ideation around product strategy into essentially vibe coding those ideas on the fly in a workshop in about half an hour, and going, this is what this concept could look like. And that sparked a ton of conversation and a ton of sort of ideation around the concept about what would work, what wouldn't work, how it would kind of connect to an actual kind of customer proposition, what the commercial value was, all of those conversations that probably wouldn't have come out of sketching some stuff on a whiteboard. So as long as you're kind of really clear that this is kind of ideation and concept work, it's not solutionizing work, then the ability to jump from a couple of Post-it notes to a working prototype to visualize an idea really quickly is super powerful. So, but I think you then need to pull that right back to the low fidelity bit of, right, we visualized this idea, we've done the concept work, let's go back and start the design process again and go through that.
recent legal cases involving Meta and Google have sort of signaled a shift towards holding platforms more accountable for any sort of real world harm, particularly around user safety. And this really is sort of marks an interesting move away from the idea of sort of neutral intermediaries. And as scrutiny sort of continues and product teams are being forced to think about growth and engagement in governance, safeguards, long-term societal impact baked into the design decisions and design process. If platforms are now being held responsible for outcomes and not just access, how does that change the way you design and ship products from day one?
My take on the meta scenario is, first of all, I mean, it might be quite a hot take, but a 20-year-old suing a multi-billion-dollar company, should it not be down to the parents giving them access to a device that then runs that software? Yeah, you could argue the algorithm is absolutely gambling. We've seen in the science where it says, you know, introducing like a young person to social media is just as bad as introducing them to something like gambling, where you've just got a slot machine. That is really bad, especially when your frontal lobe isn't really fully developed. So I'm not surprised that this person was addicted. This company's actually been charged though, but where does the blame really lie? The algorithm's there to be used, but you kind of accepted the terms and conditions before signing up. You kind of were giving a device by your parents and entrusted with that. But yeah, I'd like to hear your guys' takes on it as well.
I think I'm kind of in the same space with this. So I did media and cultural studies at university. So from like between like 1999 and 2002 or something like that. So pre kind of social media and pre a lot of internet stuff. But a lot of the things that we were kind of talking about and looking at were the impact of media on society and culture, and kind of the moral panics that went from how newspapers were rotting people's brains because they were just reading
Really?
right through to kind of stuff like the video nasties panic of the 1980s and stuff like that. And I think the narrative around social media is quite like that. That doesn't mean that the social media companies don't have responsibility for their users. I think that's really important. And I think that's something that's been kind of missed in the race for growth from Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and everything. I think social media companies have a responsibility to their users, and they have an obligation to be operating in an ethical, sustainable, kind of moral way. But I don't think that removes the user's responsibility. And I think you're absolutely right that, yes, this 20-year-old guy is suing Facebook, but there is a kind of backstory to that, which is how did you get access to these tools? How did you end up engaging with that in the first place? So I think that the kind of current sort of narrative towards ban social media, stop children using social media, all of that is the wrong take. It's more about how do you encourage younger people to use really powerful tools that enable them to engage with their friends and peers in a positive way and in an ethical way. I mean, my son is like massive Fortnite player with his friends, but playing Fortnite isn't the thing. That's a side thing to him engaging with his friends online. So him and his friends talk all the time, play together, hang out together, but digitally, the same way when we were kids, we used to hang out in the street. And I think the idea of banning social media and banning social tools for younger people removes some of that and removes some of that digital community, which I think is really important.
Yeah, I completely agree. And like on the whole algorithm side, I mean, it can be incredibly addictive. It tailors it everything towards. You could watch a video of a cat, or you could be even speaking to someone about an Amazon purchase, and then you're seeing Amazon purchases. It is so tailored to what the platform, and TikTok's even the worst for it. And there's a term now I think called like brain rot, or something like this, where it's like, your brain is rotted as a Gen Z because you're on all these social media platforms all the time and you're just doom scrolling constantly. Um, but yeah, it's. I'm very surprised that the person who was putting the case forward actually managed to win that case and actually managed to prove that there was damages involved. Because I would have been very surprised that that would have even been on Meta's case. I completely understand the eligibility and like having a looking after your user, but I'm so surprised that it actually went through. But yeah, that's just the world we're living in, I suppose.
Tools like Linear are kind of rethinking how software teams operate. Um, and sort of it's at the same time update from GitHub around sort of Copilot's data usage, is highlighting growing concerns about how AI systems learn from their developer interactions. Together, we're sort of seeing these shifts point to a deeper transformation within the technical stack, in that it's no longer just about building software, but about shaping how that intelligence is shared and governed and trusted across teams. As AI becomes embedded in the way software is written, how do you think about ownership, not just of code, but of the decisions themselves?
So that on the linear thing, issue tracking is dead. I think it's a very interesting concept. So for those who are listening that don't know, Linear are basically like a competitor to Jira built by engineers. So it's kind of like an engineer's favorite tool if they want to manage issues and create projects and feature tracking stuff, because we know how heavy-handed Jira can be. And effectively what they're introducing into their product is something called like agents who can basically take that PM scope work out, engineers picking it up later, and then raising pull requests and everything from it, and taking that and putting it into like a linear agent, getting that to do all of the heavy lifting of itself. Um, so yeah, I think there was a mention of agents doing their best work when there's customer feedback involved, internal ideas, strategic direction. That's kind of all already what humans are doing, but it's just accelerating that constantly. So if you've got a product that someone leaves some feedback on, that'll immediately go into their platform, and an agent can effectively pick that up and implement it, kind of without the need of a PM to issue track it and stuff like that. Toby, what are your thoughts on that one?
I think there's a couple of really interesting things here. I think there's a whole fundamental question about what AI agents mean for teamwork when it comes to software development, and whether AI agents are replacing roles and stuff like that. I think my position on that is that agents are really good at doing some tasks, but not really good at doing entire roles, because they haven't got the whole context and experience and judgment from doing those roles in the past. So I think there's a whole thing about how we figure out how to build agentic workflows into the way that we work, but there still needs to be some human ownership around the entire end-to-end process. A machine can't be accountable for something because it's not a person. There needs to be a person in that flow to understand, right, yeah, this decision makes sense because of all of this stuff that's happened in the past and all of these conversations we've had and all of this stuff about the history of our business. I think there's also a really interesting thing around ownership that extends beyond that, though, that I think is something that'll raise its head, and it kind of links back to the Claude code base being leaked. So it used to be that when you bought software, you got the source code for the software that you bought. That's how it worked. You bought a program, you got the program, and you could mess around with it if you wanted to anyway. SaaS kind of killed that dead, and everything was suddenly shuttered. But I think one of the conversations that organizations will be having with vendors when they're buying SaaS style products is going to be, can my agent work with this?
Oh
can
yeah.
I get my agent to kind of customize these things for me in my situation instead of raising a ticket and waiting a year for something to be added to your feature development backlog? And that that creates a fundamental shift in the way we work with third-party tools, and then the way our teams actually work with them, because we've got agentic workers in the team and in the workflow. So there's a lot of very sort of transformative shifts happening around how we develop software and how we buy software and how we interact with other companies.
Yeah, I think that's it. It reminds me of back in the day. I think, well, I don't remember this at all, but apparently Netflix used to be a thing where you could you purchased like physical DVDs from the company.
Yeah.
Wow, I mean, just starting out like that, and then looking at where it is now as this huge SaaS company is bonkers, and it begs the question. Like, I personally think all code should be open source. I think there's a reason why platforms like GitHub and GitLab all exist. Open source is an amazing, beautiful thing. It's created jobs, and it's completely thankless as well. It's one of those tasks where engineers don't have to go out of their way to contribute to open source. They do it because they care. Yeah, I love open source. Open source is great.
And it doesn't kill your potential to have a really strong business model and make money. So there isn't like a commercial thing saying that we shouldn't open source software. If you look at something like WordPress, that's a massive money generating company and organization. Most of the stuff that underpins WordPress is kind of stuff that's been built by people within the WordPress community, and there's loads of stuff like that. I mean, there's no reason why Anthropic couldn't think about, actually, maybe now that this has gone public, we should just open source this and then see
Yeah.
where that goes.
Honestly, Toby, there was a person who actually filed a pull request after it all got leaked, saying, like, basically to turn the open source switch on, and they've then since closed that pull request. And I'm just sat there thinking, my God, you can't be any more in denial than you are right now. Like, they really need to rethink their entire. I mean, they're all engineers. They're building the best model for building with code. You would think they'd be a bit more keen-eyed on open sourcing their solutions, but yeah, it is what it is.
A lot of the sort of emerging signals show that AI is really beginning to reshape how we find brands and how we sort of engage with brands. It's really shaping the way we start to see things. And I think we can all see this very much in play when we use Google these days. If customers are increasingly discovering brands through these AI systems, so through GEO or AEO, rather than just traditional search or ads, who do you think you're really designing your brand for these days?
It's very deep, because I think we all still have to very much think about SEO and how we optimize our websites and things. Can they be crawled? And are they including the right keywords? Are they being appropriately rendered so that they're being indexed by Google? Stuff like that. And now we've got to worry about, can this be picked up by an AI? And it's like, my God, it's just a constant shift. Every day is a new thing. But yeah, it's like a new thing the developer has to think about. Is like, well, I have to then go ahead and, because now I guess with ChatGPT, they probably are approaching, probably rivaling that of Google in terms of users and stuff like that. We've seen it as the fastest growing SaaS product of our time. So yeah, it's super interesting now that you've got to think about discoverability from an AI agent, probably more so than from just searching it on Google.
To be super cynical, you're possibly now even more than ever designing your brand for the kind of marketing and advertising conversation that you need to have with a large scale tech company that mostly used to be Google and Facebook and is now OpenAI and potentially Anthropic and potentially a load of other things. I think we started out with kind of search engines just finding the things that were related to the thing that we were asking for, and then advertising kind of walked all over that with Google, and kind of we were were finding stuff that had paid to be surfaced to the top of the list based on what we were asking for. And now we're moving towards using kind of AI chat tools to find the things that have been surfaced to the top of the list within that chat tool, because those are the brands that have paid OpenAI to be able to get to that point. So I think there probably will be a backlash against that, and a move towards hopefully a move back towards the older way of kind of finding stuff. And I think potentially sort of the Fediverse approach and way of kind of connecting and joining stuff together moves us back towards that. I'm interested to see where that kind of goes in terms of how we find out about brands and about information in general that isn't just being served to us by an algorithm and by a market conversation that's happened in Silicon Valley somewhere.
Yeah, I agree. And I think a lot of what my usage with LLMs comes to when I'm especially looking for things, I'll tell it to link me to stuff. And it's actually really good at doing it. But I do that more than what I would actually do going on Google, because I'm like, well, Google's the task. I don't really want to expend, even though it's probably like, 10 minutes of my day to look at something. ChatGPT can give me it in like less time. And it's just those little automations that are slowly creeping up on all of the products I think that we're using.
Kind of also links back to what we were talking about earlier, in terms of the sort of agentic side of things. There's a lot of talk within sort of the marketing communities around the fact that websites will be effectively obsolete in about a year or two's time, because what will happen is, and we see it now, is that the AI creates the website and the information based on what you've asked it. So it gives you the information laid out, and it gives you the experience that you're asking for, rather than you going to the website itself. So you hardly are ever engaging with the brand's content. You're engaging with a version of the brand's content that's been filtered through an AI system. And that AI system is informed not only by the people who've created the brand, but also every single person who's interacted with that brand online. So it's pulling in things from Reddit and Trustpilot and all of those things so when you are now experiencing a brand, it's no longer just what that brand wants you to experience. It's what every single other user also wants to share about it. And I think that's going to be very, very interesting once we start seeing things like, carts and checkouts within these sort of ChatGPT and those sort of things. Because what happens when you don't ever have to engage with anything else besides your own personal, GPT?
And to be honest, Fuzlin, you've probably invented a product idea on this call just by like that. I think for me, as a startup founder as well, I am constantly thinking about, God, what is the next idea I can think of, just in the back of my brain. And that idea you've just mentioned of imagining a system that takes in all of your like kind of interests, your intent, everything like that. And it kind of goes back to when we were talking about agentic UI before. How do you like to have your user experiences? Going to some sort of your own agent and telling it, oh, well, give me a link to the nearest restaurants, but you're not going on the restaurant's webpage anymore. You're being served your very own version of how you prefer that experience of the software to be, because LLMs can build UIs. I would say though, like the UIs that it's churning out lately aren't great, but eventually it will get to a point where they are incredibly great based on your intent and stuff. I mean, you can even see it in like video as well, where it's generating entire live action scenes from anime and stuff like that. So probably aren't too far off something being built where it's like completely agentic UI for your personal use case, which sounds pretty scary. And then it kind of links in probably to the death of SaaS companies, which is a big topic I know which is going on lately, but I just don't see SaaS ever really going away. But we're all up for change, I suppose.
How we engage with those layers of information is really interesting. So thinking about it, I used to read blogs on the actual URLs like 20 something years ago, and then we got like kind of read it later apps. So instead of actually reading a blog post, I would save it to kind of Pocket or like Readwise Reader and stuff now. So all of the content that I was interested in is kind of being served to me. And then we like moved on to kind of newsletters and Substack, and you would read those online or read those in the Substack app. But now I'm forwarding all of those to Readwise Reader. And now I've got kind of an MCP server on top of the Readwise API, serving stuff from Readwise into Obsidian or just into a terminal. So I'm like several steps removed from where I started out engaging with content. And that's across all sorts of domains and across all sorts of stuff. We're being moved further and further away from the source of what kind of the source of information. And actually, once you start thinking about the other players that come in at those different stages, it really changes our relationship with a brand or a person or a piece of content or a piece of info.
Yeah, I think it would be great, like if there was a monetization system where, yeah, you're pulling content from these different places through LLMs to then craft your own kind of ideal way to consume it, whether it's through linear, like you said, Toby, or through something else. But then that author still gets the like a contribution or something towards it. Like you don't have to then visit the site to then, give them some monetization. You can still use the AI or LLM to be like, oh, here is still some I guess traction. Here's some money or something for me to consume your content still. Because I think it's sad sometimes when people are just, you see it in art as well with AI art. People are just generating AI art off people's actual real life art, and it's like, it's a bit sad.
Well, hopefully we find a way to start engaging with the original content a little bit more. Maybe hopefully there's some way we kind of go back to that. Oh, look, this is because I always think that the one thing that's missing from LLMs and sort of engaging with ChatGPT and those sort of things is like you miss the rabbit holes. I certainly do. Like the sort of, you go from this topic, like the Wikipedia rabbit holes are sort of a very wonderful example of this. You start off on one end and you just start clicking links until you eventually off into some distance. And I think that is one of the things that I hope does reappear, because I think it's one of those things that really find out new things all the time instead of just sort of staying in a little box of knowledge, and perhaps is contributing to sort of, the death of media literacy and critical thinking that we see in. We've kind of reached the end of our topics, but I wanted to finish the pod this week with something a little bit different. What has inspired you this week? So a cultural pick of the week, music, film, TV, design, a book, something that you found that has really sort of like gone, interesting. Stephen, you look like you have something on the top of your mind.
I'm trying to think, actually. I think I've been, well, I generally just watch a lot of podcasts anyway, but I'm a big fan of Chris Williamson. I don't know if anyone on the podcast knows who he is, but he's originally from Newcastle, and he talks a lot about kind of self-improvement and stuff like that. Nothing really related to tech, but just something that's inspired me, I think, when I've been doing like the dishes and I have it on in the background and I hear a nice thing and I'm like, oh, it's made me feel a bit better today.
Love that. Toby, what's inspired you this week?
The thing that I'm really enjoying at the minute is Spotify day lists.
Just the names alone are inspiring.
So that is, so I used to be a music journalist. I've got a massive love for kind of all sorts of different popular music. I mean, me and my wife have got a massive record collection. There's like pictures of the Beatles and stuff behind me, and but the whole kind of Spotify day lists feature that just keeps surfacing like really kind of random collections of musical genres is like it's a fantastic feature in Spotify, and it's something that I wish I'd kind of thought of. Like today I was like driving my wife to work, listening to like playlist that was like 1980s angular post-punk Thursday morning. Like, that's cool. So
I will I will back that. I think the algorithm on Spotify is great, like the smart search, I think it's called. So like I'll just have it on, and because I've got a playlist that has similar songs, it's recommending similar songs, and like I'll add that to the playlist. But then I've got like a 2,000 song playlist, which I need to break up at some point.
Yeah, I'm from the kind of generation where my music discovery was going to record shops, flicking through CDs that I'd never heard of, and buying things that had interesting looking covers, and kind of
Yeah.
flipping that to this like continuous discovery of stuff that's really interesting based on things that I've liked from a really eclectic kind of collection of stuff that I'm interested in. It's really cool. Spotify Daylist has got me back into listening to new music instead of listening to the same things over and over again.
I love that. I do. My favorite thing is about those day lists are just the names of them. They're just so like ridiculous. Like Princess Bubblegum, like Thursday afternoon, and you're like, yeah, that is what it is. I've recently been going back and watching a lot of stuff from like 2009, so like TV shows from that time, before we did second screening and before we sort of where people had attention. And I think that's something that's really inspiring me. Is like stories and serialized narratives over that kind of period of time where you had to hold someone's attention from week to week over years, and the characters developed over years, and not just the 3 hours that you watch a news TV show on Netflix. So I think I really I've been inspired by and missing that kind of slow burn, like TV, and just watching things in sort of like a week to week basis, rather than here is the entire season of Bridgerton all at once, and then you forget about it for like a year until the next season of Bridgerton. So I miss it and I want it back. We can't go back. So awesome. Well, thank you both for joining us this week, and thank you to everyone who's listening. To find out more about our sessions, our briefings, our product builders, or the network, head on over to our website or any of our social channels, and of course, follow this podcast for more. We will see you next time. Thank you, everybody.